The lives of trans people intersect with homelessness in many different ways, but there aren't a lot of resources dedicated to their unique experiences. On top of being unhoused, they also deal with transphobia, misgendering, and often turn to the streets because they don't feel safe in shelters, or they're turned away from shelters because of their gender identity. All of this on top of an assault right now on the right for trans people to even exist.
A proposed bill that would ban transgender girls from playing on girls' sports teams in North Carolina is moving forward in the state.
The Montana House of Representatives voted today to block Democrat Zoe Zephyr from entering the House chamber for the rest of the session.
In recent weeks, several children's hospitals have become targets of far-right attacks and harassment over gender-affirming medical care for transgender youth.
From HEATDRAWN Media, this is Reputation, a podcast that inspires you to think deeper, approach each other with better understanding, and goes beyond the surface of social issues. I'm your host, Ethan Ward, and this season is all about the intersection of reputation and homelessness. You'll find nuanced conversations about the lives of people experiencing homelessness and the professionals who work with them. There were over 1,400 people who identified as trans or gender non-binary in the 2022 LA count of unhoused people by the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. Another roughly 900 people said they were questioning. That's a lot of people who need access to shelters or interim housing that suits their needs. Later, you'll hear from Bamby Salcedo, president of the Trans Latina Coalition, on what's needed to support trans people experiencing homelessness. But right now, I'm chatting with Garcia and Yahni Rose, transgender women who were unhoused at an early age, to talk about what life was like navigating homelessness infrastructure. They joined me on a video chat while they were in the middle of their workday at the Trans Latina Coalition. And I kind of really just want to start with both of you all telling me the story about how you ended up experiencing homelessness and like what led to that and what that was like for you. So whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first. So, hello, my name is Emily Garcia. I came here to the U.S. when I was 13 years old, and I started my transition at the age of 17. So my sister didn't accept that. So because ever since I was little, I was like, I always wanted to be a girl. So, and because of their religion and because of like Central American people, they don't take that as like, you know, how we are here, the open mind. So, and then they just decided to like, you know, disown me for that. When I was 14, I got put in foster care. I was young, of course, you know, so I didn't understand what was happening. I was a little scared. I was like, what's going on? When I turned 18, I started hanging out with the wrong people. Of course, I didn't have anybody else. So I started to hang out with the wrong people, looking for like, you know, like family love and stuff like that. I was still in foster care. So then I started hanging out around MacArthur Park. I met this group of men, and they were just like, you know, I just came up to them drunk, like blacked out, and then they offered me crystal meth. And then I started hanging out with them more and stuff like that. And then I started using to the point that I couldn't stop, and I lost my housing. I became homeless at the age of 18, like, yeah. And I lost my housing. I lost everything. I stopped caring less about everything else. I started like all I could think of was just to get high and not think about anything else because I just didn't want to actually like face what was really going on in my life at the moment. I was homeless for almost a whole year. I was staying near MacArthur Park. And I was just like, you know, it was just like sitting down, looking up and like sleeping in roofs, alleys, buses and stuff like that. So until one time I looked up and I said, like, what was really going on? Like, did I really came here and just was myself? And I talked to myself and I said, like, I was like, fine, now you understand like what's really going on in your life. Like, maybe it's time for you to just get yourself up. So I just started thinking, and then I just said I want to stop. So I went and I called the DC. So I called the DCFS people, and I told them that I wanted help go into a rehab, which they took me to a rehab named Bimini. I finished the program with them, and I got clean. And ever since then, like, I've been clean for like almost like almost like 2 years and a half now.
All right, so Yahni Rose, you experienced homelessness as well. Okay, and tell me this story about how you fell into homelessness.
First of all, Emily, I just want to say you're so strong. And it's just crazy just hearing your story to realize, how much we have in common. With that being said, I once to experience a homelessness as a teenager. For, I want to say, like 3 years, I was in a group home, an all males group home. I was the only girl. At that time, I was like already on hormones, so like, the kids were just mean. Kids are the meanest. So that was really hard to navigate. I ended up being homeless because I transitioned at 14. My mother was a single mother, and she just decided that she wasn't going to have that like in her home. So she kicked me out, and yeah, like it's kind of like, how it goes. I started prostituting, and these I met these two guys, and they got me high off of crystal. And from there, I was like, that was it for me, because it's literally like all I had out there being in the streets. Like I had to like sleep in parks and cars and stairwells. Nobody would really take me because my age.
When you say nobody would really take you, who are you talking about?
Well, I would go to like DCFS, and we would literally be in the office like all day because we would call group homes, and they would just all say we can't take her and we don't think that it's safe here for her. So, and they were right, because when they did try to put me in certain situations, it just made me run away. With that being said, I did finally get in a group home that, like I said, it was all male. Though it was like testy in the beginning, being that I was the first time they had encountered this, staff and the kids. Uh, we were able to like make changes there, because they wanted a success story, and I just kind of like had to advocate for myself. For one, like I remember the boys in the group home, like they will all get haircut money, and I'm like, well, I don't get haircuts, like I need money to get my hair done. And like
Which is actually more expensive
and I
than
had to
getting like a
advocate for
fade.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the manager gave me $50 a month to do my hair. Like, I had to work with it, but like after that, and we even like at first, like the staff will always call me he and boy and all that stuff. So then we got like someone from Children's Hospital who was trans to come in and teach them about pronouns and stuff like that. And like now I hear, like ever since I left, like there's plenty trans kids who go there, and like they get their hair allowance, and they're called she now. So I think like if when you set stuff like up like that, like it creates success stories when you're more inclusive in these shelters. Because other than that, like I was just running away from everywhere else, and kind of like rather be homeless and be on my own, but yeah, my story is totally similar to Emily's. Like I get it.
I was just about to say that there's so many similarities between you all's stories, and I want to say, first of all, thank you both for being so vulnerable and sharing that. I know that it's not easy, and especially Emily, I saw you really both of you actually were getting emotional and getting choked up there. But Yahni, just to be clear, you ended up experiencing homelessness at 14.
Yeah, from 14 to 17.
Okay, got it. So now we have a baseline for everyone, and we can now have this conversation, because this is exactly what I really wanted to talk about. This experience going through the infrastructure of like LA. I'm assuming that's where you all
Yeah.
were when
Yes.
this happened. Right?
Hollywood.
Yeah. So Hollywood.
Slums of Hollywood.
Yahni, you brought up a really good point about your experience navigating people not respecting your pronouns and things like that. And I want both of you all, if you can, to talk a little bit more about what that was like, and if you felt fear or if you felt scared. You all were so young. Like I couldn't even imagine. Like,
yeah, I would. It was crazy for me. I wouldn't say much. I didn't have fear, like, but I was really angry as a child, like really angry. So like I was kind of like ready to fight. So if you said, yeah, like, no, really, like, the staff will be like, there was this one religious guy, and he would always tell me, he was like, I'm never going to call you her. I'm never going to call you she. And I was like, that's fine. I'm just going to call you ma'am and Mrs. Ricardo. And we play, and the boys too, they'd be like, he, and I'd be like, hey girl. And they just couldn't take it. So I just decided to drive them just as crazy as they did me. But a funny thing is that same religious man, we played that game with each other for a year, and then he finally sat down and talked with me, and he was like, I read the Bible, and I was just like, who am I to judge you? And if this is what you want, then this is what you want, and you're a woman. And after that day, he like totally respected me. And like, honestly, like after that, like those boys, all the boys in there like literally became my brother. They taught me everything I know about men. It's probably like why I'm so like strong, because I was raised with a bunch of boys. But it was an experience to navigate, because when I first got there, it was like, they were like, who are you? Like, you're a man, and put, my name on the board. But I just had to, I fought back. I shouldn't have had to, but that's what I did. I just fought back. It impacted my reputation. It impacted my reputation so much to where I didn't really trust trans women here. I feel like a lot of them just talk, and they're really mean. And being addicted, and like a lot of the older girls that I know now saw me like that, saw me on the street, saw me, and just like, I was a bad child. Like from 14 to 17, I was just bad. And in a way, I didn't feel genuine. So I moved all the way to Miami to live like a hetero life. Just to realize that I was even more lonely doing that. So, but I had to like work at it. Like, you know what I mean? I had to like make myself so much not that teenager, so these girls could never look at me like that again. Yeah, it affected me. It affected me a lot. I think some of those 4 years have still like shaped who I am, like in every way, when it comes to friendships, relationships, where I search for love.
Emily, is that the same thing for you as well?
Well, for me, what it happened is like I like similar. It was like when I started trusting people, but then once the time passed by, I started looking more like a female. Like people couldn't read me, so I started just lying to myself and just like not saying who I really was. But deep down inside, I was sad, because I was like, why am I hiding myself? I shouldn't be like that. But then like for all the trauma that I've been to, I felt like really really sad, and I was like, man, like why?
Has enough changed in the city to address the needs of trans individuals when it comes to the way you all are interacting with the homelessness infrastructure?
I feel like from where it was when I was young, yes, it has changed. There is obviously, notoriety, when it comes to our issues, but I feel like there's a lot more work to do.
What do y'all want to see happen?
I want to see success stories. Like, I don't want to see you just get someone in for an emergency and then switch them out after the next 3 weeks, and then have them going for all like these resources. I feel like set someone up, in the right place, and then these places need to have programs, whether mental health programs, whether it's yoga programs, like just things that work for people, and they work a program, they have a job, they go to training, get job skills while they're in these establishments. They can get certificates while they're in establishments, before they leave the establishment. It's that they have a job. I would like to see more programs in these shelters and group homes that set up success stories for people to succeed and thrive after their stay.
That's a really good point. And Emily, what were you going to say?
Mine, I want to see like from where I was at before and where it is now. Yes, it has gone a little better, but I think we need more like programs specifically for trans women. Why? Because like we go through harder stuff than most of the community do. I'm not saying that like not everybody has a story,
Yeah.
but for us it's even like everything. It's like for us it's even harder because it's like Danny was mentioning earlier, nobody was taking me, like nobody was taking her. The same thing will happen with me, because like I even got put in like in a house bunch of men, and I had to be taken out the next day because the lady, she's like, I can't have you like already hot with breasts and everything. I can't have you in the room with the door, and I can't close, like she's like, I can't close the bed for you, so I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to let you go. And she really liked me, so I would like to see maybe more foster homes specific for trans, and more like schooling, more resources, like more stuff that we can do, so where like our young transgenders, they can actually just focus in and be like success, like we want to see more like like more successful people like us, like
Yeah.
be good and just like be themselves and be happy and just
Yeah.
love themselves and just not have to go through what we went through and stuff like
Yeah, that's some crazy stories that y'all are talking about, like like the blatant disrespect that you experienced, as kids, going through that system. So I really do hope that they make a lot of these
From
changes.
adults.
Yeah, from
From
adults.
even
That's
the
what's so crazy
adults.
about
That's
it.
crazy, right?
That is so crazy. So
oh yeah, I know.
today, you all are put together, like you all said. You consider
Thank you.
yourselves success stories. Okay, okay. So what is your reputation today?
My idea of self, like for me, because like I work here at the Trans Latino Coalition, and this is the best place for me because it's like I feel like home. Like
Oh,
every time I come here, I feel like it doesn't matter what happened, like even if I'm going through a hard stuff, because I know like this is where they're like my family. Like I really like what I do, because like if it can help somebody else, like why not? Because I'm actually helping myself for what every little thing that I do too. I'm helping myself a little bit, and I'm helping somebody else too. So like this place for me is like it's like my home, like heaven, because like I've changed a lot about when as I became here.
Mm,
Because I was like I was broken, I didn't have nothing, and now I have more self esteem, self love, and stuff like that. So yeah, this place is everything for
oh, Minyani.
my reputation is being a spicy hot tamale. No, I'm just kidding. Ask, just ask. No, I'm just kidding. I would just have to say, like right now, I feel like my reputation, I take pride in, and just being a good freaking human being. Just
Mm,
caring about others, holding space for others, also allowing myself to be intrigued by others, and just being
yeah,
self-aware of the people around me. And like I feel like
yeah.
that's all I can do. That's what I'm doing.
Awesome. Well, I love this. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you
Thank
making
you
time
for
to chat
having
with me today
us.
about this.
me. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Bamby Salcedo is president of the Trans Latina Coalition in LA, a nonprofit organization founded in 2009 by a group of trans, gender nonconforming, and intersex immigrant women in LA. They wanted to address the specific needs of TGI Latina immigrants who live in the United States. The organization is nationally recognized in 10 different states across the U.S. and provides direct services to individuals in LA. Bamby is a highly regarded Latina trans activist and advocate. We got a chance to catch up recently while she was in her office in LA. We're talking today about trans and non binary experiences navigating through the homelessness infrastructure. I would say in LA, but I would honestly think that this applies anywhere throughout the country. I really want to get your take just on a surface level about where we are with infrastructure that specifically addresses the needs of trans and non binary individuals.
Sure. I mean, it is unfortunate that in 2023, transgender, non-conforming, and intersex people continue to struggle to obtain both emergency housing, even to rent an apartment, or just get permanent housing. We as an organization have been able to be supporting people with housing, specifically more so when the pandemic started. We currently rent a house, which is our Hope House, which is privately funded. Um, and we started. with this particular project in 2018. It was great. We were housing people, for 6 months at a time while we connect them to more permanent housing situations, right? But then the pandemic hit in 2020, right? We saw that shelters, I mean, obviously the world shut down, right? And so shelters were not taking people in. And so we had to make one of the rooms in the house to be emergency housing. Shelters are not equipped to house transgender and conforming intersex people. And so that's how we, in many different ways, we support our community in that way, right?
Is there a number that you can think of, like the amount of people that you all serve that come through there?
So one, let me just say that the Los Angeles County every year they do a homeless count. In their last count, they reported that there were about 1,500 transgender and conforming individuals houseless or living on the streets. So it's a real issue, right? And so there's definitely a real issue that needs to be addressed. And, we just recently um, got funded by the Hilton Foundation to do cultural transformation trainings to five shelters here in Los Angeles for them to be able to house trans people in emergency housing situations. So
What does that training look like?
we start with an initial assessment just to really think about what their specific capacity building um, needs are. And once we do that assessment, then we tailor a training specifically for them. We could adopt a training that it could be 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, or even a full day, right? But in addition to that, we're also dedicating hours to coach those executives or decision makers from those spaces for them to be able to adopt policies and to adopt spaces that are specifically welcoming to support members of our community into those spaces.
I love that. I actually remember talking to someone who had to go through the shelter system, I guess I would say. And they were pretty much telling me about how, other people that come, through the shelter who may not be as open or understanding or anything like that. It's not just the institution itself. They're also up against people that are there who may be closed minded and may not be open to trans or non binary people themselves. What are you all doing, I guess, to, combat that perception as far as this training? Because you can't control, I guess, they can't basically tell them they can't come in. So is there anything in the training that kind of addresses that, or?
Well, I mean, I think part of what we are doing is for these organizations or institutions to really, look at their policies and see how they can make sure that they perhaps adopt some of those policies and that those policies are enforced. Obviously, you can't really control residents who are in these spaces, right? But if you do have policies in place, right, that and even announcements or messaging per se, right, like that said, trans people is welcome here, or everyone is welcome here, stuff like that. I think could help with that. But trans masculine individuals who are placed in men's shelter, for instance, right? They're targets to be sexually assaulted if residents find out, right? The same thing with women when trans women are placed in men's shelters, right? We're also targets for sexual violence and sexual harassment and all of those things. And so I think this institutions and organizations obviously need to make sure, right, that whoever is, whether it's a resident or an employee or whatever it is, right, that they understand their policies and that they actually enforce those policies.
Yeah. Do you ever think about, I honestly am really shocked that there's not more of an infrastructure in a place like LA for stuff like that. I know you just said that the Hilton Foundation, gave you all grants to kind of do this training, but are there any other policies that are like coming that may help with this or get more, funding to address this? Mayor Bass, her whole thing with Inside Safe and getting, a certain amount of unhoused people indoors. A lot of times I do wonder if it takes into consideration the very unique individuals that make up the unhoused population, because it's not just a one size fits all thing.
Right. So, I mean, that's what we are trying to do as an organization, right? Like, make sure that there is an actual infrastructure for these spaces to really understand, what are our specific needs and issues so that we can address those and find solutions to those. Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, our mayor, although she's great and amazing and obviously well intended and wants to eradicate homeless here in the city, um, it's, that is definitely a priority. But um, I think for when it comes to the trans community, right, like there's some specific issues that need to be addressed before our community gets supported the way they need to be supported.
Can you talk about some of those issues that need to be addressed specifically?
Well, I mean, just building the infrastructure of those shelters, right? I think it is important to recognize that, the systems that we have within our society, right? Like, let me just name a couple. So the housing system or shelters, right? Or even, the medical or yeah, the medical establishments, right? Um, like hospitals, for instance, right? Or even the jails, right? Like they're based on whatever you have between your legs, right? So if you have a penis, regardless if you're a trans woman, for instance, right? You're put in male spaces, right? And that's the same for the shelters, right? So these institutions like hospitals and the shelters are primarily dominated by religious institutions, right? The Salvation Army and others, right? And so that is really one of the main things, right? That they go by particular religious principles that oftentimes are extremist, right? And unfortunately, some of them are not willing or able. Well, they're able, but they're not willing to change their way of thinking and their way of serving people. Because unfortunately, when it comes to trans people, we are not serviced and supported the way that we need to be supported.
I'm wondering though, with all of this crazy mess with like these bills that are attacking trans people, and how is that affecting, in your opinion, the way that housing policy and shelter policies are going, and what is the impact of that, like the impact that has on trans individuals?
Well, what we are seeing and what we know is that because of everything that is happening in other states, right? We know that different people are fleeing to California because it's in different ways, a more secure space, right? But that could also be a myth, right? Because California is considered to be one of the most liberal states, right? And California is supposed to be the state that has the most trans inclusive legislation, and that there's more protections for trans people. But unfortunately, the reality is different for trans people who live here, right? But what we know is that um, different people are fleeing from other states coming to California, particularly the bigger cities like LA and San Francisco. And so there's an influx of people who are fleeing their, oftentimes their places of home, even families, right? Because also parents are being criminalized and attacked simply for supporting their children.
Are you seeing an influx of that in your organization and like the need of people that are needing help and assistance?
Well, I mean, we service a lot of trans people that come from different places. I mean, we have trans people who are getting released from immigration detention, for instance, that come to our organization to get services. We know that last year more than 5,000 people walk into our doors who are trans, and obviously some of those being duplicated, but we know that about 3,500 people are unduplicated individuals who walk into our doors. And so we service a large majority of members of our community.
Have you been talking to city leaders about, this stuff? I know you said you're working with the Hilton Foundation to, try to change a lot of the infrastructure that's in place. But on a city level, have you all been discussing anything that could help, with this?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're starting a campaign right now that is called hashtag We Are TGILA. And we are asking our local government to allocate specific resources for services to our community, including housing, of course. But yeah, so that's one of the things that we're doing right now, and we're gonna be going to our local government, like city council and the board of supervisors, to do public comment, and we want to make sure that we are included in the budget. I mean, everything is going to be posted in our social
Okay.
media and stuff, so I'll invite people to please follow us on Instagram um, and Twitter and TikTok and all of those places.
If you want to learn more about the work happening at the Trans Latina Coalition and how to get involved, go to translatinacoalition.org to learn more. Reputation is a production of HEATDRAWN Media. This episode was written, reported, and executive produced by me, your host, Ethan Ward. Sound engineering by Jeha Joshua Chang. Original music composition by James Ingram of Mega Dream Productions. Art and graphics by Kelly Bernard. We're grateful for your support. If you haven't yet, please follow and rate our feed in Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening now. Or you can share with your friends. Join the conversation on Twitter at ReputationPod or hit me up at I am Ethan Ward. You can also email us your hot takes at reputation@heatdrawn.com.